Today, we're breaking down the week 2 matchup. We're going to talk about the 3 keys that are important for this matchup, and then we're going to answer your questions in a Gophers mailbag.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. So if you love the Gophers, if you can't get enough of Gopher sports, definitely be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube and follow the podcast wherever you get podcasts at Locked On Golden Gophers. And while you're there, please leave a 5-star review, help others find the show, and we can continue to build this community up. The community has been building, and I absolutely love it. Today's third segment is built by you, the listeners, the everydayers who tap in and get your questions that you want to know answered. So keep doing that. Let's keep building this thing up. But today we're talking about the breaking down of this Eastern Michigan matchup. On top of that, we're going to talk about the 3 keys that Minnesota needs to improve in this game in order to walk away with a win and continue to develop on the season. So let's jump right in on that. Now, today's matchup, like I said, we're going to break it down. The Gophers are the favorites in this Eastern Michigan matchup at home on Saturday night. The spread right now is 20.5 points, which means if you pick Minnesota, they not only have to win, but they have to win by 21 points or more. Now, the total score line is 47.5 points, so it's a bit bigger than the one at with Nebraska, but not by a lot, not by a long shot. So this points line is always harder for me to anticipate, especially not knowing which way this thing could go. But in my head, this matchup is kind of like the New Mexico State matchup, except for maybe with a little bit better of an opponent. So I can anticipate the scoring being kind of like that. I believe we won like 38-0 in that game last year. I could see this being like a 31-7 game, 35-10 game, something in that sphere. So I would probably take the under on the points in this one. Now, current stats that are impressive for this Gophers team on the defensive side of ball. They are 18th in the nation in pass yards allowed. On top of that, they're 27th in the nation in scoring defense, 7th in turnovers gained, and 14th in the fewest penalties. And that's after one game. So I expect some of these to improve. I expect some of these maybe to sit around where they are. But the biggest thing that I think the Gophers struggled with in that last game versus Nebraska defensively is that the rushing defense didn't look great. Now, Jeff Sims scorched us for 91 rushing yards on the ground. And then on top of that, the running backs combined for 90 yards on the ground. Almost 200 yards rushing for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Gophers are going to have to fix that because this EMU opponent likes to run the ball as well. They've got 2 capable running backs and a quarterback that can move on the ground. They'll run some more of that triple option that we saw a little bit from Nebraska. So the Gophers are going to have to clean it up in that department. Not only will this quarterback have some running ability, Jeff Sims had some running ability, but next week as well, Drake May will bring some running ability. So the Gophers are going to have to figure out how to wean that in. Otherwise, teams are going to continue to attack in that manner. Now, this week will be a big week to clean up the fundamentals and play clean football for the Gophers. There were some mistakes, especially on the offensive side of ball this past week, and we have to play to Minnesota standards, one of the fewest penalized teams, one of the teams that really goes through the fundamentals and gets things done because they play clean, and that playing clean helps put them in better positions. This game is going to be one where Minnesota needs to just play to its standard, and if they do, there shouldn't be too much to worry about in this one. Now, special teams are going to be the key stress for this week with the Eastern Michigan matchup. Chris Creighton absolutely believes in special teams and how it sets up the offense, and that the special teams are just as important as any other side of ball in the football game. So although I don't necessarily think the Gophers special teams have to be special, they do have to be consistent and fundamental. And if they can't do that, then the Gophers could be set up in some tough field positions. Now, the defense can handle tough field positions, but that's not something you want to have to do for this team. You want to be able to play a clean game, put less on tape, and be able to come away with a big victory while still cleaning up the little aspects that went wrong in week 1. Eastern Michigan, like I said, attacks with its special teams, and they set themselves up with good field position with those special teams. Now, Fleck mentioned in the presser that they play a lot of starters on their special teams units because they're going to play whoever the best talent is in order to help set themselves up. So I think overall, Chris Creighton is going to absolutely try to attack in that area. The Gophers gave up one really big special teams kick return last week. We're not going to be able to do that. You have to stay locked in. You have to stay in your lane, and you have to stay ready and committed, even if it doesn't look like it's coming your way, because it's in that slight moment, that slight hesitation, that one time where you decide I'm going to break in because he's on the far side and there's no way he can get out to my gap. They kick it back outside, and that's where a huge return comes in. It's what happened on the big one for this Nebraska. So 2 young players got a little bit easy, got a little bit excited about seeing where it was going the opposite way and cut their lanes, and all of a sudden you're looking at a huge return that was cut back your way, and you see that on the tape. So you're not going to want to do things like that. You have to stay consistent. Along with consistency, we need the punting game to be more consistent. It can't be a great punt, then a medium punt, then a great punt, then a bad punt. We've got to find consistency on the special teams. Now, my biggest concern unit in this game is the offensive line. Can they get back on track and look convincing when facing a defense that isn't a 3-3-5 system? That is going to be a key in this one. And can they look dominant against an inferior opponent and help generate some confidence for a big next opponent we have coming up as well? So they definitely need to clean things up. They need to show some more dominance in this game and show that they have it together, that it was just a fluke against the 3-3-5 system in a week 1 matchup that was just the perfect storm that made the offense look worse than it actually is. So hopefully that's what we see in this one. But the Gophers units on each side of the field that we need to stand strong. The first is that offensive line. Like I said, they're kind of my biggest concern for the week. They struggled in week 1. They should be a more basic front looks against them in this upcoming matchup, so it shouldn't be as complex for them to key in on where the pressure is coming from. And they're probably also playing against smaller athletes than the Nebraska team that just had massive defensive linemen that just gave them absolutely all they could handle. I think it'll be a more manageable task in this week's matchup. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I think the linebackers are the key unit this week. Will Cody Lindenberg be back? That's a big question, but they will likely have to ID a lot of looks that they are getting and be big in stopping the triple option looks with the quarterbacks and running backs of Eastern Michigan. So the linebackers are going to be communicating like crazy on the field in this one, whether that be Cody Lindenberg, whether that be the young guys that we saw this past week. Regardless, we're going to need key communication and quick recognition from the linebacker core this week. And then the big questions on those linebacker rooms is, can they cut down on the missed tackles and stuff the run? If you can stuff the run, you'll get this team out of the play that it wants to get into. Maybe they fall behind by a few scores and then they have to be forced to pass the ball, get out of their comfort zone, and they don't really have receivers that can handle this secondary. So I think that's going to be big time. And then finally, does the linebacker unit take another step up as they continue to build experience in a relatively young room? So those are the 2 rooms that I'm kind of locked in on this week for the Gophers matchup. Now, the Gophers should win this game handily. With Gophers fans talking a lot of trash to Wisconsin fans, hopefully they can do it convincingly, because Wisconsin wasn't super convincing early against their MAC opponent in their first week 1 matchup. If the Gophers come out and they struggle a little bit with Eastern Michigan, then you know what? I would expect that trash talk to come back. So hopefully the Gophers can get it done and that sentiment won't be shared by Minnesota in week 2. But for some reason, like I said, this Eastern Michigan team reminds me of last year's New Mexico State matchup. I believe Eastern Michigan is better, has better running backs, has better special teams. But if Minnesota can slow down the special teams and don't let them set up the field how they're hoping to have shorter fields to attack the defense, I think that this game will be a big win for Minnesota. Now, next, we're going to talk about the 3 keys, the 3 focus points in this game to win, and that is what is coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit, and it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts or accessories, you need to head on over to eBay Motors. They have a guaranteed fit, and you can be sure every part that you have fits right the first time around. Just add your vehicle to your garage and look for the green check to see if the part will fit. And if it has that green check, it will fit or your money back. So be sure to head on over to eBay Motors, get that guaranteed fit, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you're going to be back in the game in no time. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices over at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, Gophers fans, thank you for locking in and making Locked On Golden Gophers your first listen when it comes to Gophers Daily Sports. Now, we're going to ride through these 3 keys, and then we're going to get to the everydayers, listeners' questions. And we're going to have a questions of the day, a Gophers mailbag to wrap this thing up. But first, let's talk about the keys. And before we do that, I do want to let you a reminder to remember that if you can't get enough college football, every Friday there will be a live stream on every Locked On College host channel covering the big news of college football with multiple Locked On hosts from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on every Friday. So definitely tap in on that. But let's talk about these 3 keys. Let's talk about what the Gophers need to do in this matchup. Now, the first one, key number 1 that we have to focus on is that we have to play clean on special teams. Now, yesterday we talked about how successful Eastern Michigan has been in the special teams game, and a recap of that is 19 of their 33 points in their week 1 matchup came from special teams. And we're not just talking field goals, we're not just talking extra points. They had a 30-yard punt return, they had a safety forced on the punt defense, they had a punt return touchdown of 85 yards and a 96-yard kickoff return touchdown. So Minnesota has to shape up in the special teams. They don't have to be special on special teams, but they have to stick to the principles and not get anxious and try to do too much or do something special, therefore leaving lanes and leaving rules that are set in that game. Now, Nebraska's only big touchdown was set up by a major kick return, and you cannot allow that to happen this week. And then a huge special teams play in general. So if Eastern Michigan can get a huge special teams play, it's almost like creating a turnover. It gives you that new life. It gives you that new energy. We have to continue to suck the life out of the room and make sure that they don't feel any swell of momentum, any swell of excitement or swell of hope, and make sure that you really put a dominant stamp on this game. Now, key number 2 is that we have to take care of the football. You cannot have any turnovers. The only thing that really allows a team that isn't the same level of play as the Gophers or as a Power 5 opponent, so those G5 teams, those FCS teams, the only way they really get into games is by having momentum, huge energy swings. Now, Coach Fleck, he doesn't believe in momentum. It's not a thing. It's not. Well, over here at Locked On Golden Gophers, we do believe in momentum. It is a thing, and there are swings in the game in which you can be re-inspired, be reinvigorated, and ready to go. And turnovers are the largest thing that cause those swells of momentum. So I think that overall, if this team, this Eastern Michigan team, is going to have any opportunity to be a danger to the Golden Gophers, it is going to come from turnovers in order to stay in the game. So you can't give them turnovers. You have to play clean. And on top of that, if the young running backs want a shot to play in the big games, we didn't see them under the bright lights of Nebraska, but we've got North Carolina coming up. In a few weeks after that, like 3-4 weeks after that, we've got Michigan at home. We've got Iowa on the road. You've got major matchups coming up. And if those young running backs want to see time in those games, they have to prove now in the Eastern Michigans, in the Northwesterns, in the Louisianas, that you have what it takes to secure the ball and prove that you're not going to be a liability in that department. So this is one of the matchups where they're going to have touches, they're going to have opportunities, and they have to prove that they can take care of the ball. Now, there should be some explosive opportunities in this game, but we cannot force them. We cannot just try to manufacture, create, or throw dangerous balls to our wide receivers because we think of this opponent as one that might be easier. You cannot do that. I don't think PJ Fleck will have this team thinking that the opponent is easier by any stretch or means. I think they're going to take them absolutely seriously. So you got to hone in on the explosives. You can take those shots. I'm not saying don't have explosive plays. I'm not saying don't take a shot on a deep ball. I'm just saying don't force it. That is the biggest thing here. And then finally, clean football should allow Minnesota to control the time of possession, which we know Coach Fleck loves to do. And if you control the time of possession in this one, you should likely walk away with a victory. Now, the third and final key that we have to hone in on is to play Joe Rossi style defense. What do you mean by that, Kane? What do you mean we always play Joe Rossi defense? He's the D coordinator. That's what we do. Hold on. Hear me out. What I mean is that you need to get off the field on third downs. You want to have 3 and outs. You want to get the ball back into your offense's hands as soon as possible so then they can wind the clock down, they can control the clock, and allow your defense to make more adjustments on the sidelines, because that is what Joe Rossi is great at, is when he gets off the field, he is great at looking at that film over there on the iPads and coming up with the adjustments or the different looks that can create problems to get you off the field again in your next series. But if you're turning the ball over, if you're going 3 and out, it doesn't allow Joe Rossi to be able to make those adjustments. So overall, you're going to want to get off the field on third downs. Don't miss tackles, tackle through the hip. And on top of that, don't allow explosive plays. These are all keys to a Joe Rossi defense. And then the final key would be to generate turnovers and sacks. Again, anything to get the ball back into your offense's hands. So overall, those are the 3 keys for this matchup. Now, each week I'm going to talk about an advantage that Minnesota might have in this one as well. Last week, it was Joe Rossi and the consistency on the defense, and I think that showed true. This week, I think Minnesota's advantage is going to be having the size and the depth. This Eastern Michigan team has had moments where they struggled against the FCS Howard opponent that they played last week, and most of that came in the third quarter when Howard had the time to make some adjustments. Now, across the board, I think the Eastern Michigan Eagles could struggle with the size and the depth of the Minnesota Gophers that will really test them, especially in the trenches. Now, as the team gets gassed, as the team plays a ton of reps on defense, and if Minnesota is wearing them out and having that time of possession, they could get to the point where they're more exhausted and they're missing more tackles. That tends to happen in those type of situations. And by the second half, this is one where we might see some explosive opportunities for the Gophers, especially in the ground game. So that's what is that advantage for the Gophers in this one. But we're going to wrap it up with your questions. Each and every week, we're going to try to do a listener's mailbag, and we are going at it today with some listeners' questions, which I hope you're excited for, coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, so let's talk about the Gophers questions of the day. The Gophers listeners mailbag, that's what we're doing to wrap this one up. Now, one of the biggest questions that we got is that who will bring life or find energy in this running back room? I think it could go any which way. I think you're going to see carries from all 4 running backs because this matchup just favors it more. Eastern Michigan struggled against the run last week. Plus, you need to get a feel for these younger guys. I know you were trying to keep some vet experience, make sure they were keeping the ball, not turning it over or anything like that on a live televised game, first week, early game jitters and all that. Well, this game, you can handle maybe having some sloppy play. You don't want it. You want the younger guys to take care of it and prove to you that they can handle it. But if they don't, this is a game you feel like you can still be in if something goes catastrophically. So I think overall, who will bring the life or the energy? I think it will be one of the young running backs. I think Sean Tyler could maybe find a breakaway one in this one with all the missed tackles that Eastern Michigan had. We just said as you wear them down, more explosives become a possibility. So maybe in the second half of this game, we see a breakaway, huge Sean Tyler run with the speed that he brings and the fresh legs he could have with all 4 running backs playing. So that's the first question, how we'll answer it. The second one was a fun one. It's if Nebraska cools off this immensely hyped Colorado team and the defense shows to be extremely tough and give it a close game or a win, will people recognize that Minnesota didn't just play some bad team, but won a difficult game when playing sloppy offense? I think that's a great question. I think it's a fun question, and it's one that I definitely will be tapped into because I think this Nebraska defensive line is in the different looks that they give with the 3-3-5 is the real deal. Now, I think that Colorado's style of play should probably be a hard matchup against the defense regardless because they like to throw the ball. So all they have to do is really adjust to having more of a quick game instead of always attacking deep. Like the Nebraska wasn't wanting the Gophers to attack deep. So they sat their secondary back a little bit further on top of playing with the different blitzes and pressures and stunts and coverages. So I think overall, you're going to see them still play with the blitzes and fronts, but I think they'll still kind of let their guys be further back and make Shedeur Sanders take the easy routes. Make Shedeur Sanders take the quick outs, the quick slants, the quick flats, and not take any of the deep shots or not. Maybe they try to single out and take Travis Hunter out of the game, but they had 4 receivers over 100 yards last week, so it's going to be a tough matchup, but I think Nebraska can make it a close one. On top of that, TCU, when they got a running game generated against Colorado's defense, but then they just went away from it and they continued to keep trying to pass and struggling here and there in that area. I think overall this might be a lower scoring affair. I think if it is, if Nebraska can keep the scoring down, then Jeff Sims can likely run the ball a lot, and your running backs can run the ball a lot, and you can keep it out of Colorado's hands, and it could be a style of play that gives Colorado a bit more of a fit. So that'll definitely be a good one, but regardless, I think if Nebraska holds strong in that one, it can help the Gophers' resume, absolutely. The next question we have is, do we see Cody Lindenberg in the next game, or is he back for Carolina? What were the thoughts on the linebacker play against Nebraska, and who steps up on the interior defensive line? First off, Cody Lindenberg, he's supposed to be back sometime soon. Now, Coach Fleck does not give away any injury information unless it's that 2 hours before now where he has to. He's obligated to. But we're not going to hear any for sures on this. Now, I think in this given situation, you probably rest him for this game. You let him or you play him in a limited capacity for both him and Chris Autman-Bell, because I know some people are curious about that as well. Both of them, maybe you play them in a more limited capacity in snaps limit. You set a number of snaps that these guys play just to get them warm, get them ready for the next week. But I think that's when you kind of let the reins loose and you let them run wild and do their thing, and also not have as much tape or the difference in speed that these guys bring and the elements that they can help with the Gophers. So I think overall, maybe you see limited snaps or no snaps for Cody Lindenberg, and he comes back maybe full force in Carolina. But if either one of them, if there's any sort of hesitancy, any sort of I'm just not quite there, then you hold off till the next week. Linebacker play against Nebraska, I thought I did pretty good overall. There was a couple of missed tackles that you definitely have to clean up, but you kind of expect it being in your first real true start in the bright lights and really getting into it. I think Maverick Baranowski showed me everything that I wanted to see besides a couple missed tackles. You clean up on the missed tackles, and I think you've got another young guy waiting in the wings that has a lot of ability in that linebacker room. Now, linebackers are the room that Coach Joe Rossi directly coaches each and every indie session in the practices. So I expect those guys to be ready. I expect them to be able to step up. And I think even if it had to go deeper, I think if you got an Eli Mao on the field, a Tyler Stolsky on the field, they're going to be ready because Joe Rossi has that room ready. Absolutely. I saw it in fall camp. Even guys that we didn't see play in the game on Nebraska with Cody Lindenberg out, they will be able to answer the call if necessary. Finally, that interior defensive line, I think the biggest player is Devin Eastern in that room. I think he has the most upside. I think he made impact in plays last week that maybe fans don't recognize because they only see a couple, like 1 or 2 tackles, and they're like, well, that wasn't that huge. But he had difference-making pressure on Sims. In fact, the first interception, him and Kyler Bob, both interior defensive linemen, had the quarterback, Devin Eastern had him grabbed by his leg, so you couldn't even step into the throw. On top of that, Kyler Bob brought the pressure and almost sacked him, gave him a QB hit after that throw, and it turned into an interception because he just couldn't put enough behind the ball. If you have moments like that, it doesn't always show up in the stat book, but those defensive line, it showed that it can bring more than what we've seen in the past, and I think we might see even more of that in this Eastern Michigan game. So those two continue to step up for me, but I think overall, once Darnell Jeffries Hopefully he gets back from injury. He'll be a helpful player in this room, and I heard a lot of positive things about him in the fall session. The next question we have is, why do you think we will have success in our running game against Eastern Michigan, and will our running backs have success against tougher defenses like Iowa and Wisconsin, and why? Here's the thing. I think our running game struggled in week 1 with the complexity of the looks that the 3-3-5 gave, because you can disguise where the pressure is coming from. You talk about, it looks like maybe 6 guys are lined up and all coming your way, or 4 guys are lined up and coming your way and 2 are staying back. But then all of a sudden, of those 4 guys that you think are coming your way, only 3 come your way. 1 drops into coverage off to the left. So you see that dropping into the coverage, but all of a sudden the guy you thought was staying in coverage over on the right is coming in hot, unblocked, because the running back has to pick that guy up, but maybe your running back's on the left side because he thought he was coming from the left. And this right guy's coming. He can't get across. He gets stuck on one of your offensive linemen, and you have a free hitter coming in. Those are the complexities that Ethan and this Gophers offensive line was experiencing from the 3-3-5 defense. I don't think you see as much confusion. Maybe there's some hidden elements here and there. There's going to be with every defense, but I think you get more of a straight up and more of the things you can see on tape. That's the biggest thing from that Nebraska game, is we didn't have any tape on how this defense actually ran. You had Syracuse stuff from last year, but again, different athletes, different types of beasts. You can't see the speed elements that they're bringing. You can't see which guys are the ones that they like to do certain things with. Now, 2-3 games from now, there's going to be more tape on Nebraska, so maybe the Gophers would play that game a lot differently, having the film to understand it, but they were playing ghosts. Now you're going to have more on this Eastern Michigan team, not only because they played last week, so you have some current data, but on top of that, this Eastern Michigan team had some of these same coaches for the past couple of years, so you know what they like to do, and you know how you can try to attack, how you can try to take things away. So I think that the offensive line is going to understand the defense a little bit more. They're going to have some size advantages for the defense in this Eastern Michigan game, and it's going to allow the team to run the ball better. Now, when you're talking about with the tougher defenses, like your Iowas, like your Wisconsins, I think it's going to come down to, those games are later, so we'll have more data points. So I think we still should have some more success in the ground game, but we're going to need more from these running backs to see that they have the special ability to fight forward, to make plays on their own. They don't just need good run lanes. They have some creativity and some creatability of their own ilk. So we're going to need to see that for me to have more confidence against the tougher defenses, but having more film is going to help, plain and simple. Now, the only other team that has elements of the 3-3-5 defense in their system moving forward is Wisconsin. So we'll see if the Gophers can answer it. Now, that's polar opposites. You had game 1, and that'll be the final game of the regular season. So we'll see how the Gophers can adjust in that element. Now, we've got 3 questions left. First is, what would supercharge our special teams? I think the biggest thing is going to be consistency. Right now, I think maybe we have too many people trying to play hero ball or trying to be the home run hitter. I think sometimes Quentin Redding has to be able to just take the touchback and give us field position, and then other times take it out, and all of a sudden, hopefully you can break a big gainer. You don't have to take every single return out and then maybe set us up on the 18-yard line as opposed to the 25. It gives you some variety. It gives the defense not knowing which one you're going to attack with, but if you attack with every kick return, they're going to play it and try to stop you at that 18, 17-yard line, and it gives your team harder position on the field. On top of that, with the punting, we can't have a punt on the 1 and then have a punt shanked or have a punt low kicked or anything like that. We have to have consistency. If we have consistency, I think it's going to at least have our special teams above average. But if we can't have that consistency, it's going to be rough. It's going to be tough sledding. It's going to be what we've seen for the past few years, up and down in the special teams game. Now, Dragan Kesich is a powerful leg. We've seen that. We've seen the ability. We've seen the game winner. Even on the 54-yarder that he pushed to the left, it had the distance. So that could be super special. But I think it could play an element. His big leg could play an element in this upcoming matchup, because maybe instead of giving them opportunities to return the ball in general and take a kickoff return, maybe he's putting them in the back of the end zone every single time out of the end zone, so that way they can't return it at all and they have to start on the 25, and you can't give them any advantage of making that field shorter. So I think Dragan Kesich brings a lot of special to this special teams. Final 2 questions kind of go together. Are we going to see this type of performance from Daniel Jackson every week? And then also, can you talk about how we move around the wide receivers and things like that? Daniel Jackson, answering that one, I think he is going to create and have plays each and every week, but I don't know if it will be like what we saw of this caliber with 16 targets and toe drag swag and all of that. I think he's going to be a factor. He's probably going to lead the Gophers in receiving yards on the season. But once you get Crab back, once you get Elijah Spencer more involved, once Le'Meke Brockington gets some more looks, I think it's going to be kind of a different guy each week that could step up. Now, maybe this next week it's Elijah Spencer who sees more targets and Daniel Jackson's come down, or Corey Crooms comes down and Le'Meke Brockington's goes up. I think it's going to depend, and it's going to be a pick your poison, especially against better opponents once we get into the harder defenses, because you're going to want to spread it out. Now, the Gophers had a lot different looks in the first half of that game, where we saw a lot more Le'Meke Brockington on the field. He wasn't getting the targets as much, but we saw more packages with him. And then the second half of the game, we saw more packages with Elijah Spencer. So I really think it depends on what the defense is giving us on how the Gophers line up and the different packages that they call. Now, we've seen Brevin Spanford lined up on the outside before. You saw it last year as well. But I think having the versatility in general, we saw different looks for the different receivers, Crooms on the outside. We've seen Sean Tyler motioned out of the backfield to an out wide spread, 5 out before. So don't be surprised if some of that happens this season. But I think overall it is attacking with different looks. The versatility makes this Gophers team a dangerous team, because then you can start to key in on the mismatches on the field as you hone in onto your opponent's personnel and you know which corners give up bigger plays or which corners can be attacked in which ways. That's when you can find a Brevin Spanford and just throw it up to him because you have the trust in it. Or you can find Sean Tyler out wide running a drag, but his speed element will give him the separation. Or Corey Crooms lined up outside and they're thinking he's going to come across the middle because of that, but he takes a deep shot and Le'Meke Brockington comes on a slant. Like, there's so much versatility that is how it can change the game, and it's going to change game to game because of the game plan and the personnel that the different defenses have. The Crab question, I think I answered it earlier as well, but I think we'll see him sooner than later. It sounds like he's really close, if not ready right now. Maybe he has limited snaps in this next upcoming matchup, and then we see no restrictions versus North Carolina. That's going to do it for us on today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want your questions answered, we'll do some more next week. Be sure to subscribe over on YouTube, and don't forget to go crazy. It's football time, folks, and you cannot take it for granted because we just had 7 long months of no football. That's going to do it for us on Locked On Golden Gophers. Row the boat, Sky Go Gophers, and as always, don't forget to subscribe.